Okay, so I'm just going to be teaching you about the features of science for the psychology A level. Okay, so there's two main people that you've got to know for this. That's Kuhn and Popper. First of all, Kuhn, he's the guy that talks about paradigms. Now, a paradigm is a set of shared assumptions and methods. And social science lacks the universally accepted assumptions and methods that is in a paradigm. For example, in psychology, which is a social science, there are many theories that conflict with each other, so there is no accepted paradigm in psychology. So that, in a way, doesn't really support psychology as much as a science. Whereas biology and physics, they're the natural sciences, they have true theories that everyone knows to actually be true and real. Because the paradigms of the theory of, like, the Big Bang Theory, that everyone knows to be true and no one really denies that. There's not many conflicting theories with that, and hence it's all in one paradigm. A set of shared assumptions and methods. The assumption that the universe was basically started by the Big Bang, and the methods that was made to look into it, telescopes and all that. I don't know. I study psychology, not physics. I don't know about that, but yeah. So anyway, in terms of paradigms, as Kuhn says, when there's several people that question the paradigm, that causes a paradigm shift, which is a scientific revolution. And that's all it is about paradigm shift. Many people question the paradigm, and the paradigm shifts to a new paradigm. And that's what it is. Okay? And Popper, he talks about falsifiability. And what Popper says is that genuine theories should be up for hypothesis testing with the possibility that they could be proven false. Okay? And that's how he came up with the theory of falsification. The theories that survive the most attempts to prove it false makes the theory the strongest. But that does not necessarily make it true. Hence, nothing is actually proved, it's just waiting to be falsified. Okay? So, as much as you might try to, make Bowlby's theory of maternal deprivation false, you can try and prove it as many times as you like, but you can never really say it's true or it's not. You're just kind of disproving it, trying to disprove it all the time. That's what it is. That's falsifiability. Just trying to prove something false. And the theory that struggles to be proved false is the strongest, but doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Okay. Then, in terms of theory, and another feature of science is theory construction and hypothesis testing. So, in science, science always tests theories. A theory is a general law or principle that explains a particular event or behaviour. Okay? So, like Bowlby's theory of maternal deprivation, that would be explaining an event of kind of maybe affectionless psychopathy because they're maternally deprived, in a nutshell. So the way theory is made is that you begin by gathering evidence from observation. So you just look at something and just think, you just have a hunch about it, and then you begin experimenting. So for example, from observation, I might think coffee makes you more anxious. So, with that evidence I got from observation, I'll experiment this by, say, giving people coffee and, assessing their anxiety on a questionnaire. With a theory, it should be possible to make clear and precise predictions about the future on the basis of that theory. So if, for example, the theory that coffee does make you more anxious, I should be able to predict that if someone drinks, say, a couple of cups of coffee, they'll be more anxious than the person who didn't. Okay? And from there, once you've got the theory, you can make different hypotheses. And then new hypotheses from an existing theory is called deduction. Okay, so like another hypothesis could be if you drink less coffee, you'll be less anxious, and that would count as a hypothesis, and that would be deduction because you've deducted it from the original theory that coffee makes you more anxious. Okay? Another feature of science is replicability. Replicability. Okay. Yeah, Popper talks about this as well, and it's about basically what replicability is: the ability to determine the validity of the finding and to determine the reliability of the method. So validity of finding, reliability of method. That's what replicability is. And with replicability, you should be able to generalize different laws from experiments you made. It's to kind of verify your findings. If a researcher conducts the same experiment, he must be able to verify it against your original findings and experiment to make sure it's all replicable and the findings themselves are valid. Okay? And finally, the last feature of science in the psychology A level is objectivity and the empirical method. So in science, you need to try and maintain objectivity. So you need to essentially maintain a critical distance from the research. An example of this will be in lab experiments. They always have the most control of the independent and the dependent variables. You've always got that clearly defined, and that's what makes it objective. And don't forget, when you make hypotheses and find your variables, you need to operationalize them. So going back to my coffee example, to operationalize anxiety, it'll be a score on a questionnaire about anxiety on a Likert scale, 1 to 10, of how anxious a person feels. That's subjective, but of course that carries its weaknesses because individual differences. People might think that one person's 2 could be another person's 4. So yeah, but that's not the point. It still means that lab experiments are objective, and that's all part of the empirical method. So, and yeah, objectivity is the basis of the empirical method. A theory cannot be scientific unless it can be empirically tested and verified. And that's why the majority of theories in psychology aren't actually scientific. So going back to Bowlby's theory of maternal deprivation, you cannot empirically test that, and you cannot verify that either. And there you go. That's why it's not as scientific.